I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Our next guest has been asked for. I can tell when I need to book somebody. People start commenting on USAWatchdog.com. People start commenting on the YouTube channel, and they say, hey, get Doug Casey on. Doug Casey, of course, a best-selling author, a two-time best-selling author, a big thinker, expert on macroeconomics and the economy. Doug Casey, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Well, Greg, it is a pleasure to be back here with you. Thanks.
I want to read you a couple of things that you were telling people back in 2009. You were asking the question or telling people what they should do in a coming depression. Any of that abate yet? Coming depression?
Well, let's put it this way. I was saying in 2007 that we're going into a gigantic financial hurricane. Now, it hit in 2008 and 2009. For the last few years, we've been in the eye of the storm. It's a gigantic hurricane. We've got a big eye of the storm. But now, as we speak, we're entering the trailing edge of this hurricane, and it's going to be much worse and much longer lasting and much different than what we saw in 2008 and 2009, and that was ugly, you'll recall.
In 2011, you were telling people what to do when money dies, and just most recently, a couple of people I've had on this. One of a good friend of mine, well, actually both friends of mine, Greg Mannarino and Gerald Celente, independently of each other last week, were talking about how the central banks around the world were getting together and colluding. Basically, this is a basic premise: colluding and rigging the markets and the financial system to continue to prop it up. Do you think their view is correct? And if not, or if so, tell us why.
There's a lot of truth to that, because all of these central bankers are doing the same stupid things. Since the last crisis began in 2007, they've been printing trillions of new currency units, all of them. The American Central Bank, the Fed, the Europeans, the Japanese, the Chinese, they've all printed trillions of new currency units. So, yeah, they're doing this in concert because they don't want to see the markets collapse. But they're going to collapse. And the nature of this collapse is going to be different because of the fact that they've created trillions and trillions of new currency units. That's created bubbles all over through the world economy. So, yes, they do act in concert, the central banks. I'll add parenthetically that everybody watches these central banks and tries to second-guess them, but they're populated by the same kind of bureaucrats that run the national post offices, except they've gone to better schools and they wear more expensive suits. The central banks serve no useful purpose. They should be abolished. They're not necessary. They're destructive.
Well, and then now I want to get on to the next question, which we know last week we got this big debt ceiling raise and this, quote, budget deal that's apparently in the works. It's basically a done deal, $19.6 trillion, and actually people are happy about this this increase in the debt ceiling. Some people say, well, it's basically just unlimited because they'll just keep raising it. People are happy about it and are celebrating about it. Is this debt deal and this raising of the debt ceiling something we should celebrate about, or should we say, oh my gosh, if this isn't a marker that they're never going to pay that money back, I don't know what is. What do you think about this $19.6 trillion? Are we ever paying it back? Do we ever intend to?
No, of course. The concept is ridiculous. And the only people that are happy about it are the top dogs and the running dogs in and around the government and New York. Because when central banks, like the Fed, create more money, some people get it before other people. And the people that are hooked up with the deep state in Washington get it first. So they get to stand right there at the fire hydrant and drink their fill. And then eventually it dwindles down, trickles down, if you would, to people in middle America. And but there's not much left at that point. That's why the rich are getting richer. It's because of exactly these things that the government's doing. The rich guys get that money that the Fed is creating first. And because they can hire the lawyers to find loopholes in these libraries of laws that are passed because they can hire accountants to reduce their taxes. They can hire the best investment advisors. They get into the best deals. Of course, the rich are getting richer as a result of this idiocy.
You have predicted that money is going to actually just die, and so far it hasn't. When do you think it might die, and are you surprised they've propped this up as long as they have? I mean, a lot of people are surprised they've kept this thing going this long.
Well, there's an old saying, things that you expect to happen often take longer than you think to happen, but once they actually get underway, they happen much more quickly. And I think that's the way it'll be here. Everything looks good until all of a sudden it looks terribly bad. It's like when you jump off the Empire State Building. Everything's fine as you pass the 50th floor. It all happens at once when you hit the sidewalk. And I think that's what we're looking at. And we're going to start hitting the sidewalk before the end of the year, quite frankly. This is very serious. This is the most serious thing since the 1930s. This may be the most serious thing since the Industrial Revolution overturned the previous basis of life.
You know, speaking of hitting the sidewalk, at least the banks, who are supposed to be all fixed, they're supposed to be all healthy, that they bought all this debt, they monetized all this debt, and banks yet are reporting missing earnings misses. They're closing their trading desks. Just last week, Deutsche Bank, who's got, I don't know, 70 trillion in derivatives, what could go wrong? Deutsche Bank announced, that they've had terrible financial problems. They're laying off 35,000 people globally. Is the canary in the coal mine, or at least one of the canaries in the coal mine, is the financial sector, the banks that aren't doing well?
Well, look, there's a huge amount of debt in the world. Just in the United States, there's $1 trillion of car loans. That's not counting all the leased cars where people don't even have a make-pretend asset like a car. There's $1.3 trillion of student loans. Then you talk about the government debt and consumer debt and mortgage debt. And, of course, the banks are going to get in trouble because they're the ones that have actually made these loans. And a lot of these loans just are not going to be paid back. So these banks think they have trillions of dollars worth of assets, but if people don't pay the loans back, the depositors in the banks could be very unhappy. And then the government will bail them out by creating trillions of new dollars, and the dollar is going to lose all value. I don't see any way out. We either are going to have a catastrophic deflation, where all these loans are defaulted on and the banks have to close and bonds are defaulted and the stock market crashes. That's ugly. That's a 1929 style depression. Or the government reacts and prints up so much money that you wind up in a 1923-style German inflation. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place, between Scylla and Charybdis. It's very serious. I don't know. Maybe they can wrench one more artificial boom out of the cycle at this point, but I don't think so.
Some people say I say, looking at this, I say we have. Who says we have one or the other? Maybe we have both inflation and deflation, either sequentially or at the same time. That they say, well, let's all these go under, and we'll prop up, and we'll print enough. I mean, could you imagine just printing up enough money to save Deutsche Bank? Just one bank? They got 70 trillion in derivatives. What would?
You're quite correct, and in fact, these banks shouldn't have these huge trading desks, these giant rooms full of people saying, hello, New York, buy, hello, Chicago, buy, hello, Los Angeles, sell, New York and Chicago are buying. This is an immense amount of worthless friction in the system. The entire global system is too financialized. People aren't concentrating on creating new wealth. It's these financial institutions shuffling around paper. So no, this is not a good or productive thing. The banks themselves are very unsound. Banking should be a very simple business. where you take in deposits, you lend them out for a short period of time in self-liquidating loans that are well-banked. It's not the way things work today. The whole world is afloat in debt. And let me remark on the importance of that. When you have debt, it means that you're either mortgaging your future production or you're consuming somebody else's past production. That's what the debt is. So it artificially increases your standard of living now, but it decreases your future standard of living in a very real way. So that's why, no matter whether it's the government or the students or whoever it is.
Which brings us to, several years ago, you were telling people that what they should do in a financial depression, and I have people all the time say, ask them what little people should do, regular, normal people, like me and you and whatever. So what should people do? Obviously, you think in 2009, you were telling people to get ready for a coming depression. We are much closer now, correct?
Well, I think the Depression actually started, and I call it the Greater Depression because it's going to dwarf what happened from 1929 to 1946. It's already started. We're just in the eye of the storm, but we're leaving that now. So what should the average person do? You've got to liquidate to start with. In other words, right now, while it's still possible, you should get rid of things that you don't need. Clean out that storage unit. Clean out that attic, that basement. Have a yard sale. Get rid of stuff that you don't really need or want and generate cash for it. That's number one. Number two is consolidate. Consolidate your assets. Find out what you have, where you have, rationalize things, certainly including any investments that you have. And generate, work harder while it's possible to do. There's an infinite demand for goods and services on the part of the market, on the part of other people. I have an infinite demand for goods and services. So do you. So does everybody. So there's no excuse for being underemployed or unemployed. And then you're going to have to learn to speculate because with all these dollars that are being created, the markets are going to be going up and down like an elevator with a lunatic at the controls, which is actually a very accurate analogy in today's context. And it will be possible to make a fortune in these chaotic markets. Not easy and dangerous, but it's possible. So that's what I'd suggest. To start with, though, the average guy, after he does these things that I just mentioned, you should buy gold, frankly. Don't keep your savings in a bank so much as in gold coins.
Or silver coins?
Or silver coins. Silver is more volatile than gold. And of course, since it's worth so much less, it's harder to store if you have a significant amount of wealth, but absolutely. In fact, I think there's probably more upside in silver than there even is in gold.
Actually, Overstock.com must be taking your advice because they have bought small, as they say, it's a widely reported story, small increments of gold and silver coins. They bought enough for 3 months' food for all their employees. What do you think about that? Is their CEO a madman or utterly genius?
Oh, I think he's going to prove to have been very, very prescient because there's no magic guarantee that when you go down to the Safeway or the Whole Foods tomorrow morning that those shelves are going to be filled with things. And there's no guarantee that your credit card is going to work when you want to check out with it. Or there's no guarantee, quite frankly, that you'll have the money that it takes to buy these things. So I think it's just prudent to be an ant and set these things aside as opposed to a grasshopper and just hope they magically appear. No, it's logic.
And what do you think about the marker of this idea that he's doing that now? What do you think about the idea of the Deutsche Bank laying off 35,000 people now? Does that take your horizon and shrink it, like you said? I think it's going to blow, or we're going to have a crash before the end of the year. Tell me about your horizon and what you think is coming and how short or long it is.
I won't be surprised if by the end of this year things start coming apart. And I can promise you I will be surprised if by the time we talk, let's say a year from now, that we're not in the middle of a real financial cataclysm. Now, I may be eating my words with a fork and spoon a year from now when we talk, but I think we're going to be right in the middle of it by that time. And the scariest thing about that is that if I'm right next year about things having already fallen apart, we're going to be just before a presidential election. And when people are scared, they're going to want to vote for somebody that promises them the most and promises it with the most certainty. I don't know who that's going to be, but it's not a good environment to elect a powerful political leader.
David Stockman says the same thing you did. That's funny, big thinkers. He says it won't last, and it will not make it through the next presidential cycle. We're going to have something happen before now, and it could happen any time. Are you in the camp that it's just going to take months, or you're saying that we could have any black swan, a sinking of a ship in the Suez Canal, a downing of a Russian aircraft by an American fighter in Syria? We're heading into a real dicey time militarily, just all over the world. The South China Sea, we're sending ships into the South China Sea supposedly to test the Chinese resolve about these islands they built. What do you think about the war card around the world?
One consequence of the depression that started in 1929 were the wars that we saw all over the world, starting in Spain and then in China, and then, of course, evolving into World War II. So, of course, when the economy gets bad, governments like to blame somebody else. It's those damned Arabs for raising the price of oil too high or taking it too low. It's those damn Chinese for unemploying American workers by sending all this wonderful cheap stuff over here. They'll be blaming everybody and anybody. And the people in control of the U.S. government, I wonder if they're actually psychotic, trying to actually provoke a war with the Chinese, which is what they're doing right now by sending U.S. ships within the territorial waters that China is claiming. It's much as if the Chinese were flying planes and sending warships around Santa Catalina off of the coast of California. It's equally insane. And why are there American fighter pilots and soldiers in Iraq? Most Americans can't even find the place on the map, looking for trouble with the Russians. And this is going on all over the world. You hit enough hornets' nests, and eventually one of them is going to sting you back.
Doug Casey, Casey Research. Doug Casey, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. You're well worth the wait. Should have had you on sooner. You're hard to get a hold of. But a lot of people have been asking for you, and I can see why. You're a smart guy. Thanks for coming on USAWatchdog.com and updating us on the financial and geopolitical situation we find ourselves in the world.
When we talk next, Greg, things are going to be very exciting indeed in the world at large.
Thank you, Doug Casey.
Thanks, Greg.